anything like that? Did you ever have an experience?
Yes.
Did you? What was it like for you?
I don't think the mystical experience would come if I didn't say some of the other things first.
Oh, I see.
Number one, if I were to use my total experience only for everybody and all human beings, would I be really justified in not throwing myself away? I felt that was pretty much of a mess. But if I use it for everybody, then I could see that might be valid. I had to go through some very important, quick decisions in my thinking. And I said, I think that if I would not only use my experiences for everybody, but I would use them only to develop artifacts and technology that would improve the environment for everybody, so that everybody could afford to really dare to be open with one another. It might be really the greatest thing could be done. And I also then said, if I'm committing myself to developing technology, I'm going to need enormous amounts of materials, technology itself, which means that also equivalent to a great deal of money. And nobody right now accredit me with anything. So if I'm committing myself to this kind of thing, I obviously going to have a very important kind of a faith. And I said, you've been exposed, as all of us are, the fact that almost all human beings have some kind of an intuitive sense about God. There's a great many organized religions. I said, from now on, if I'm going to do what I do, I'm going to have to do my own thinking. It must always be predicated on experience and not what I call believing. I said, by the word believe, I mean accepting explanations of physical phenomena without any experimental evidence. And very much of my religious education, which was in the Episcopal Church, was on the basis you believe this, you believe that. And my grandmother, who knew how much, when I was really very small, said, now you know how much I love you, and I'll tell you what went on 2,000 years ago, which I'm convinced is true. Because you ought to be able to trust me, you ought to believe. So I found a great chain of believing. And I said, I'm going to have to dare to stop and have to give up all the things I was asked to believe and go on my own experimental evidence. If I'm going to really do some effective thinking on behalf of humanity. So I said, it is part of your experience that people are intuitively moved to assume some kind of God. So I said, in your own personal experience, you have any reason to have to assume a greater intellectual integrity to be operating in the universe than that of humans. And I said, my scientific training was so good that I said, I'm just overwhelmed by it. Just discovering principles of gravity, all of which can be only mathematically expressed, and mathematics is purely intellectual. I find none of these great principles governing physical universe have ever contradicted any others. They are inter-augmentative. So there's something in this an intellectual, only mathematically expressible set of design laws that convince me of a priori intellectual integrity. Particularly the fact that the brain is always dealing in things, coordinating our senses. And senses always deal in things that stop because we also go to sleep. Our brain deals in the temporal special cases. I find the human mind has an extraordinary capability from time to time to discover relationships existing between special cases that can no way be smelt, touched, seen, or heard. As for instance, Kepler discovering the extraordinary mathematical attraction going on between celestial bodies, millions and millions of miles apart. Yet their behavior came out with all the same number in terms of area they swept out in a given amount of time. And they said they're obviously coordinating, and how can they coordinate when they don't touch when they're millions of miles apart? There's nothing you can see, smell, touch going on in here. Through a series of events like Kepler's work and then Galileo's and finally Isaac Newton, discovering these celestial bodies were inter-attracting one another, or the amount of interaction was operative. It was the inverse of the mathematical, the second power of the arithmetical distances intervening. If you halve the distance between the two celestial bodies, you increase the attractiveness fourfold. The fact that there then is something you couldn't see, that here was a law that had nothing to do with the brain at all, but the human minds have been admitted to these laws, and what Newton then hypothesized as being what's going on was tried out by all the different astronomers, sure enough explained all the celestial behaviors. The fact is that there were laws actually governing here which had no exception, and no exception meant they were eternal, so that we found the human mind as being admitted to some of the eternal laws, whereas the brain was dealing entirely in the temporal. Things begin and end. This just overwhelmed me, this as I really reviewed, and I said, I'm just overwhelmed by the experimental evidence of a greater intellect operating universe than that of the universe. So I don't need anybody ever to give me any advice about this thing from now on. And I'm going to assume that humans were introduced in the universe for some very important reason in support of the great design, and that we're given that beautiful mind with that access for some as yet unknown real reason. But if I were to use this to try to make humans a success physically, could be that I don't have to earn any living, I don't have to be patronized by anybody. I see the grass doesn't have to pay the clouds for the rain. And I see that I'm going to have absolute faith then from now on. If I'm doing what God wants done, then I'll get on. And that is now 55 years ago, and I have gotten on.
It works.
And now, it was not long after that initial thinking, which then required an enormous amount of self-discipline to get over all the things that people I love had told me to believe, and to dare to really question and look at it very, very much in the... One day I was walking down Michigan Avenue in 1927, and suddenly you spoke about a sense of being in a almost sort of an electrical cloud.
Yes.
Suddenly my feet didn't seem to be touching the avenue at all, and I heard this extraordinary voice, which seemed extraordinary to me because I speak something called English. and why this voice would use it at any rate, there's no question about the words were clarion clear and very extraordinary voice, never heard anything like it before, which said, from now on, you need never await temporal attestation to your thought. You think the truth. And it's a very extraordinary to feel that way. I had, Barbara, from there on, a great deal of thought about the coming of another Christ, and then I came very much to the conclusion that everybody would become a Christ.
Yes.
And that was just as clear to me as could be. So it wouldn't be any one person who really there's going to be extraordinary kind of transition of humanity. That's who will die first and who will be born. I don't know, but it seems as if we're on the threshold then of the Omnichrist.
Of the Omnichrist. That's exactly the feeling I got.